Across restless waters they sailed toward a promise that turned to whispers, then to silence. 117 colonists vanished, as if swallowed by the very land they sought to claim. Only a word remained, carved in weathered wood, pointing toward a fate unknown. Roanoke's secret endures, waiting in the shadows, daring us to find it. In 1587, 117 men, women, and children stepped off wooden ships into the unknown, onto a narrow strip of land between forest and ocean. They came at the behest of empire to carve out a foothold for Queen Elizabeth I, to bring glory to England, and perhaps to seek a new beginning for themselves. But 3 years later, when their governor returned, he found no smiling faces, no home fires burning, only silence, and a single carved word: Croatoan. What happened to the lost colony of Roanoke has haunted history for over 4 centuries. Was it misfortune, betrayal, survival, or something even stranger? This is a story not just of disappearance, but of ambition, desperation, and the fragile human dream of starting anew. A mystery that echoes through the very soil of America, still unsolved, still enduring. By the final decades of the 16th century, England teetered between ambition and peril. Spain ruled the seas, its coffers brimming with gold from the New World. Queen Elizabeth I, seeking her own empire, turned to one of her most trusted courtiers, Sir Walter Raleigh. Raleigh was charming, daring, and determined. In 1584, he received a royal charter to claim any unoccupied lands in the name of England. Success would mean fortune and favor. Failure would mean ruin. To scout a new colony, Raleigh sent expeditions across the Atlantic. They found Roanoke Island, a remote and fertile spit of land nestled between the Atlantic Ocean and the mainland forests of what we now call North Carolina. It seemed perfect, at least from a distance. In 1585, the first group of settlers arrived, led not by soldiers, but by thinkers, scientist Thomas Harriot and artist-cartographer John White. They meticulously documented the strange and wondrous New World. Towering trees, lush fields, new animals never before seen by Europeans. White's watercolors, vivid deer, tobacco plants, native villages would become the first visual records of North America seen by English eyes. Harriot's reports spoke of abundant resources and the gentle nature of the Algonquian-speaking peoples. But the promise soon soured. The English settlers, woefully unprepared to live off the land, depended heavily on local tribes for food and guidance. Small disputes escalated. When a silver cup vanished from the English encampment, blame fell swiftly upon the Croatoan. In retaliation, English soldiers seeking to restore order burned the village and beheaded Chief Wingina. Trust was shattered. Trade ceased. The settlers, facing starvation, abandoned Roanoke barely a year after landing, catching a fortuitous ride home aboard Sir Francis Drake's fleet. Raleigh's grand plans seemed in tatters. Yet dreams die hard. Undeterred, Raleigh ordered another expedition. This time it would not be soldiers, but families, men, women, and children who could build a true, permanent colony. They would plant crops, raise homes, establish England's claim by sheer force of presence. In 1587, Governor John White led the new colonists across the Atlantic. Among them was his daughter, Eleanor Dare, heavily pregnant with her first child. They arrived not at Chesapeake Bay as planned, but back at the abandoned ruins of Roanoke, an ominous sign ignored in the urgency to settle before winter. Weeks later, Eleanor Dare gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. The birth was celebrated as a sign of divine favor, but the omens soon darkened. Supplies ran dangerously low. The soil, salt-choked and sandy, yielded poor harvests. Fishing was unreliable, and relations with the nearby Croatoan tribe, once cautiously friendly, grew tense under the pressure of resource scarcity. Faced with growing hunger and no immediate hope of resupply, the settlers made a disparate choice. They would send John White back to England to beg for aid. As White's ship slipped over the horizon, none among them could have imagined it would be the last time they would ever see the Old World, or that the colony's name would pass into legend, bound forever to mystery. John White's journey back to England should have been swift. Instead, it became a cruel test of patience and despair. Even as White's ship reached English shores, ominous news awaited him. Spain, furious over English privateering raids, had launched the Spanish Armada, a massive fleet meant to crush England once and for all. Queen Elizabeth declared a state of emergency. Every seaworthy vessel, from mighty galleons to humble merchant ships, was commandeered for national defense. For White, there would be no immediate return to Roanoke. He petitioned tirelessly, his heart weighted by the thought of his daughter Eleanor, his infant granddaughter Virginia, and the fragile settlers he had left behind. Months turned into years. The war consumed England's attention and resources. All the while, across the sea, the fate of Roanoke remained shrouded in silence. Finally, in 1593, long years after his departure, White secured passage aboard a privateering fleet headed toward the Americas. The voyage was perilous. Storms battered the ships, and hostile encounters with Spanish vessels delayed them further. But driven by hope and fear, White pressed on. On August 18, 1590, Virginia Dare's third birthday, John White's party anchored off Roanoke Island. White's journal captures the moment. We hoped to find some signs of our company, but we found none. We found the houses taken down, and the place very strongly enclosed, with a high palisade. The settlement was eerily orderly, no signs of battle, no scattered bodies. The houses had been dismantled carefully, not burned or destroyed. White's eyes caught the first clue. The word Croatoan carved into a post of the palisade. Nearby, 3 letters CRO were carved into a tree. Before his departure 3 years earlier, White had given the settlers a simple signal. If they were forced to move under duress, they were to carve a cross beneath their message. No cross was found. Had they left willingly? Had they sought refuge with the Croatoan people on nearby Hatteras Island? Desperate to search further, White begged the ship's captain to sail south. But fate, once again, intervened. A brutal storm slammed into the coast, driving the battered ship toward the open sea. Supplies were ruined. Tempers flared. White pleaded to return, but the captain refused. John White left Roanoke with nothing but questions and heartbreak. He would never see his family again. He would never set foot in the New World again. His last words about the colony are tinged with sorrow and uncertainty. I greatly joyed that I had found a certain token of their being at Croatoan, but the weather was so extreme, and our victuals so scant, that we could not find them. The 117 men, women, and children, including Virginia Dare, simply vanished from the record of history. For centuries after John White's heartbroken departure, the fate of the Roanoke colonists remained a blank page in history. No letters, no survivors, no graves, no final accounts. Only theories, speculation, and the stubborn, tantalizing clues left behind. The simplest theory, and the one most historians accept, is that the colonists sought refuge with the Croatoan tribe. Croatoan was the name for both a nearby island and the indigenous people who lived there, seafarers, fishermen, and traders, familiar with English goods from previous encounters. If starvation loomed and hope for resupply faded, it would have made sense for the settlers to abandon their crumbling village and join their indigenous neighbors. Later reports, though second-hand and often unreliable, spoke of native villages where English-style houses stood, and of tribespeople with gray eyes, light hair, and European features, traces, perhaps, of assimilation. Yet this peaceful solution is not the only possibility. Other accounts tell a darker story. The Croatoan, one of the dominant tribes on the mainland, had every reason to seek vengeance. Years earlier, English soldiers had decapitated their chief, burned their villages, and poisoned fragile alliances with violence and arrogance. Some historians believe that once the settlers were weakened by hunger and fear, the Croatoan or allied tribes struck swiftly and wiped out the colony in retaliation. Spanish influence cannot be ruled out either. Spain, wary of any English intrusion into its claimed territories, maintained secret agents and informants across the Atlantic. Some Spanish records hint at expeditions to locate and destroy English outposts along the American coast. Yet, no definitive proof of a Spanish raid at Roanoke has ever been found. Environmental catastrophe also casts its long shadow. Modern analysis of ancient tree rings, the silent witnesses of history, reveals that the Roanoke region suffered the worst drought in 800 years during the critical period from 1587 to 1589. Crops would have withered, freshwater sources dried up, starvation and desperation would have gnawed at the settlers, fraying their bonds and forcing desperate decisions. Other explanations drift into the fringes of plausibility. Some suggest that the colony attempted to sail back to England on their own, building crude boats that vanished into the relentless Atlantic. Others weave tales of supernatural forces, ghost stories of spectral settlers wandering the Carolina shores, lost forever between two worlds. In the 1930s, the so-called Dare stones briefly ignited a frenzy of excitement. Supposedly discovered in Georgia and the Carolinas, these stones bore carved messages from Eleanor Dare, chronicling a tragic tale of attack, loss, and survival. If real, they would have rewritten history. But most experts now agree the stones were clever forgeries, a hoax fueled by the American public's hunger for answers. Even today, the truth remains elusive. Each theory holds fragments of possibility. Each new discovery deepens the puzzle rather than solves it. Roanoke is not simply a lost colony. It is a mirror reflecting the hopes, fears, and ambitions of all who seek to uncover its fate. Centuries passed before anyone made a serious effort to search for the lost colony's physical remains. For generations, Roanoke was treated less as a historical site and more as a cautionary legend, a ghost story whispered along the wind-swept shores of the Outer Banks. It wasn't until the 20th century that archaeology, armed with new techniques and a renewed spirit of inquiry, began to pry at the edges of the mystery. Early digs at the site of the original Roanoke settlement yielded frustratingly little. Shifting sands, hurricanes, and centuries of erosion had erased much of the fragile footprint the colonists left behind. Wooden structures rotted. Foundations crumbled. Even the palisade walls, once proudly carved by hand, had vanished into the soil. Yet archaeologists found scattered artifacts, rusted iron tools, fragments of English pottery, a battered breastplate. Each discovery was a whisper from the past, yet none offered answers about where the settlers had gone. Attention soon turned to Hatteras Island, the homeland of the Croatoan people. Teams excavating near the modern village of Buxton unearthed objects that raised tantalizing possibilities. A 16th century signet ring, a hilt from an English rapier, a slate writing tablet bearing faint traces of Latin script. Were these heirlooms, traded or stolen goods from early contact? Or were they possessions of settlers who had abandoned Roanoke and made new lives among the Croatoans? The evidence was suggestive but circumstantial. Without human remains, English-style graves, or unmistakable signs of settlement, the picture remained blurred. Meanwhile, a discovery hidden in plain sight reignited the search in a dramatic way. In 2012, scholars re-examining John White's original maps, preserved for centuries in the British Museum, noticed something odd. A patch skillfully overlaid on the paper, concealing a mark underneath. When researchers peeled back the patch using ultraviolet imaging, they revealed a symbol, a small fort-like structure placed about 50 miles inland from Roanoke. This finding seemed to match a comment from White himself that the settlers had intended to move 50 miles into the Main. For the first time, archaeologists had a potential destination, a site near the headwaters of the Chowan River, today known as Site X. Excavations there uncovered European artifacts, a rapier, gun flints, parts of a metallurgical smelting pot, all datable to the late 1500s. They lay mixed with Native American pottery, suggesting a blending of cultures. But once again, no unambiguous evidence of a transplanted Roanoke colony emerged. No English houses, no communal graves, no permanent marks of their passing. The question loomed larger than ever. Had the colonists split into smaller groups? Had some gone inland, others south with the Croatoan? Had they been scattered to the winds before they could leave a permanent footprint? Today, archaeologists employ cutting-edge tools, ground-penetrating radar, aerial LiDAR scans, soil chemistry analysis to search for subtle traces, post holes invisible to the naked eye, long-buried ditches, or the chemical signatures of ancient hearth fires. Yet Roanoke stubbornly guards its secrets. Each fragment found brings a surge of hope in us, a momentary breath of triumph. But the great silence at the heart of the mystery endures. Roanoke is a site where even a handful of iron nails can spark international headlines. A place where absence, the very lack of evidence, has become part of the story itself. Long after the settlers themselves were gone, the story of Roanoke refused to die. It passed from generation to generation, shifting from a historical puzzle into something deeper, a myth woven into the fabric of American identity. In the early colonial period, as English settlements took root along the Atlantic coast, the memory of Roanoke lingered like a ghost. For those carving out lives in the New World, the lost colony was a reminder of the peril that lurked beyond the fragile boundaries of their forts and fields. It was a warning. Nature was vast, unforgiving, and indifferent to ambition. But as the colonies grew and the frontier pushed westward, the meaning of Roanoke changed. During the American Revolution, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas, became a symbol of innocence, perseverance, and a birthright to the land. Writers and politicians invoked her name as a rallying cry, blending history with nationalism. In this new version, Roanoke was not a story of failure, but of destiny interrupted a tragedy that foretold eventual triumph. In the 19th century, Romanticism transformed Roanoke again. Playwrights staged dramas about the colonists' noble struggles. Poets wrote ballads envisioning Eleanor Dare, bravely leading survivors into the wilderness. Artists painted mist-shrouded depictions of lost settlers wandering forest paths, forever searching for home. The lost colony became America's Atlantis, a symbol of mystery, tragedy, and the haunting pull of what might have been. Not all retellings were lofty. As popular culture evolved, the mystery of Roanoke found new and sometimes strange forms. In the 20th and 21st centuries, it became the backdrop for novels, horror films, and television shows. Some imagined the colonists kidnapped by aliens. Others whispered of supernatural curses or time slips into alternate dimensions. Roanoke entered the realm of the paranormal, joining the Bermuda Triangle and the legends of vanished civilizations in the pantheon of unsolved mysteries that capture the popular imagination. Yet, for the indigenous peoples of coastal North Carolina, the Croatoan descendants, the Lumbee, the Hatteras, the story remains something much closer to home. Oral histories among these tribes tell of ancestors who welcomed desperate strangers, of bloodlines that merged, and of a history overlooked by colonial narratives. For them, the lost colony is not a tale of disappearance, but of survival, a testimony to resilience, adaptation, and the complexity of early American identity, one where European and native lives entwined, not always through conquest, but through necessity and shared fate. Roanoke's true legacy is how it has refused to be contained. It is history and legend, memory and myth, all at once. A puzzle missing crucial pieces, yet whose very incompleteness invites endless exploration. To ask what happened to the lost colony is, in some ways, to ask who we are, a people forever reaching into the unknown, and forever haunted by the shadows we find there. Even now, centuries later, The name Roanoke stirs something deep in the human imagination. The mystery has outlived kings and empires, survived wars and revolutions, and adapted to every generation's dreams and fears. But why? Why does this particular story refuse to fade into the quiet archives of forgotten history? In part, it is because Roanoke offers no neat ending. It defies the human desire for closure, for a simple narrative where every question has an answer and every journey a destination. The lost colony is a wound left open not through oversight, but through the relentless forces of nature, time, and human frailty. Yet it is also because Roanoke speaks to something larger than itself. It embodies the eternal gamble of exploration, the willingness to risk everything for a dream, and the understanding that the outcome may not be triumph, but tragedy. In 2023, efforts to solve the mystery continue with new urgency. Geneticists working alongside members of the Lumbee and Hatteras tribes have begun analyzing DNA, searching for traces of English ancestry hidden within modern bloodlines. Their research is painstaking, respectful, and still ongoing, a testament to the delicate intersection of history, identity, and science. Archaeologists now comb satellite images and underwater scans, seeking hidden structures along the Carolina coast and riverbanks where erosion and rising seas may have buried evidence. Every year brings new digs, new finds, fragments of a rapier hilt, shards of English pottery, beads traded between cultures. Each discovery draws us a little closer, and yet the whole truth remains just out of reach, like a ship glimpsed through mist. Perhaps the answer to Roanoke's mystery will one day be found. Perhaps not. But in a way, the search itself has become the real legacy. The lost colony teaches us that exploration is not about guaranteeing success. It is about daring the unknown, even when failure is likely. The colonists of Roanoke set out with grand ambitions to claim land, to build a new society, to bring the old world's order to the new. They found, instead, a vast wilderness that could not be tamed by ambition alone. They became part of a story larger than conquest or settlement, a story about survival, about loss, about the fragile threads that connect the past to the present. And as long as that lone word Croatoan endures, carved not just into a post but into the fabric of American memory, the 117 souls who vanished from Roanoke will never be truly lost. They will remain a whisper on the wind, a question half answered, a reminder that history is not only what we know, but what we yearn to understand. They came seeking a new world. They found a wilderness. And in their disappearance, they left behind a mirror, reflecting our endless fascination with the shadows of the past. The mystery of Roanoke endures, because perhaps it must.